you go. So just so everyone knows, we will be recording this. So if you do have to drop off early or something, I will be sending out a link where you can watch it. As I said, thanks for joining us. Thanks for taking the time for our June Oxygen Blast. Gavin Nicholson will be our presenter. Gavin is one of our senior consultants and trainers here at Intertech. But before we turn it over to him, I just want to do a quick intro of Intertech in case some of you aren't familiar with us. We've been around since 1991, actually, and we're the largest software and IT training consulting firm in the state of Minnesota. But over the last few years, or probably the last 5 to 10 years, we've expanded both nationally and globally. We've won over 40 awards for growth and top workplace best practices. But with all that, the company was really built on customer satisfaction. And to that end, the model we've built lends to that, which is we have instructors in our classrooms that also go out and do consulting work, and then we have consultants who are in our classrooms teaching when they're not at a customer site. So it really helps us to bring the real world into the classroom, and teaching has become a big part of our consulting practice as well. So we've maintained some fairly stringent hiring practices over the years, which has helped us build up a staff of some pretty highly experienced professionals that not only empower Fortune 500 companies with software and IT solutions, but we also train them. So good recipe for our growth and for our customers' growth. But you guys are here to hear about SQL, so I want to turn it over to Gavin, let him introduce himself a bit. Oh, I want to make one more note to Gavin, just one of the slides that I was looking for. We do have a summer training program going on right now. It's highlighted in red there. So if anyone is interested in that, just let us know. But it does include a class that discount can be applied towards a class that Gavin will be talking about as well. So with that, Gavin, it's all you.
Okay. All right. Well, folks, Gavin Michelson, as he told you, I am a trainer and consultant here at Intertech since 2005, going on a decade, which is pretty outstanding. It's a long time at a technology company, but I do love working here. Anyways, I have been programming professionally since 1994 as a software developer, worked on a lot of different languages and different technologies. I started working with SQL Server back in 6.5. That was really when it was more side-based, if you will. And when I started working with DTS, that was back in the old DTS days with SQL Server 7.0 in 2000. I created several packages for moving data. We were creating packages as I was consulting back then, moving it from mainframe flat files over to a SQL Server database. I got some experience with the DTS packages, and then I started working with SSIS packages. Completely new rewrite, of course, from Microsoft when SQL Server 2005 came out. I do teach a lot of different courses here at Intertech. You can see I've got the programming courses in front of us. They're all numbered based on the Microsoft course numbers. And I do have a bunch of Microsoft certifications, which I didn't put up here, but you have to be an MCT to deliver the Microsoft courses. Specifically, know that I have been teaching some of the different courses as well with the business intelligence classes, and I've almost got my MCSE for business intelligence. I have to pass just a couple more exams. I'm going to take one in another week here. But I also teach the SQL Server classes. Now, one of the things I noticed, and maybe some of you folks have actually attended some of the training with me, but Microsoft, some of their latest business intelligence classes are 5 days long, and they include content that may or may not be related to something you're interested in. So what I actually have done is, for example, with SSIS, I took one of their existing courses, which is 5 days long, and I chopped out just the chapters that you folks need to create SSIS packages. And I said, I don't think they want all this other stuff. We'll offer both classes going forward here at Intertech, but I'm just going to offer a custom class just focusing on SSIS. So if there's a DBA or a developer out there that needs to get up to speed with creating packages for SSIS, we've actually created a custom course. You know, I've selected just the chapters that you need out of the normal Microsoft course, because some of the other chapters, honestly, do you need to learn about what are all the hardware requirements for defining a data warehouse? It has nothing to do with the actual SSIS package creation, you know. If you do need that stuff, we do offer that class, but we also have a custom 3-day class that's right here on the slide. And what I can do here, I hope you folks can find the chat window inside of here. If you're sharing full screen, there is a little chat menu at the very top. Otherwise, if you can find that chat, I like to send stuff through the chat window. I can actually copy content such as this, and I can copy it, and I can send it to everybody. Now, meanwhile, this is being recorded, and you'll have access to the slide deck at the end as well. We always publish it up there with our other Oxygen blasts. So there's just some links there, some information if you're interested in taking some training on SSIS. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and get started here. I don't want to take your time, and I'm really honored that you guys signed in. I want to make this a practical hour of your time, okay? So first up, what are we going to talk about? The new tools of SSIS, SQL Server Integration Services. SQL Server Integration Services, we know, of course, is the free tool that's included with SQL Server. So long as you drop the coin and go get a license for SQL Server, you have SSIS, SSAS, and SSRS. SSIS, SQL Server Integration Services, is Microsoft's freely included ETL utility. Extract, transform, and load is what ETL stands for. And it's all about moving data. Extract it from a source. Transform it, fix the data, prepare the data, and send it to one or more destinations. That's what we love about ETL. And with other database solutions, we know, of course, you might have to buy a license, but Microsoft says, hey, we'll just include it with SSIS. You don't have to drop a dime on it. You already bought SQL Server, you're good to go. We'll talk about the different versions. We'll talk about the different tools that we use now. BIDS, we'll talk about BIDS compared to the new tool, SSDT, or however you want to pronounce it, SSDT-BI, and we'll talk about working with that, the general user interface, and working with the designers. I am also going to bring up some of the bug features, or bug fixes, and then the features that they dropped, saying that's enough, starting with SQL 2012. I also have a mention at the very end there. You'll notice this future of SSIS. I'll mention just a few things that are coming down the pipe with SQL 2016 that they're working on. It's not released yet, but I just want you guys to know about it. What else we got? Some of the designer updates for both on the control flow and the data flow side of things. Deployment is probably the biggest thing that changed with SSIS. They still support the old deployment model, but we're going to talk about the new deployment model and also how we can configure our projects and packages. And also SSIS management. I got a small section on that as well here in this slide deck. I don't think I have 50 slides, even though it says that at the bottom. So I think I have like 30-something. So don't worry, it's not going to be a full 50. I'll try to be, and keep your attention, I'll try to be exciting as possible, and I don't want this to be dry. So first off, just a brief history with SSIS. Remember that the marketing team at Microsoft, when they heard that they were completely rewriting DTS, well, they didn't tell the developers to change the name internally. The developers continued to use the name DTS everywhere. So they had rewritten a lot of the engine, the whole new engine of SSIS, using the DTS word everywhere. And then marketing says, well, we have to change this to SQL Server Integration Services. Well, it was already too late for the developers. They were using DTS everywhere. And they still are today, even in the latest version of SQL Server. Even our files, our packages that we create, now have a DTSX extension on the end. Remember, anything that's cool and new from Microsoft has to have a big old X stomped on it. Like the Xbox or ActiveX controls, and anything else that's new and cool will have an X on it. And the same thing applies for docx files or for DTSX files, which are our packages that we create with SSIS. SSIS 2005 required us to use Visual Studio 2005 to create or edit our packages. Remember, packages in this version were the final executable that you created. You created a package, which is just a little XML file. That's another reason why the files end with a DTS extension. It was the final output. So if I switch over to, let's see if this works for you guys, but if I switch over to the old BIDS, this one's technically BIDS 2008, you can see that I have a DTSX file, and here it is. I've got it on the control flow, and remember, every package only has one control flow, but you can have any number of data flows, which are one of the special tasks that we have. And of course, things execute sequentially based on the arrows, which we call precedent constraints. Okay, well, this is just an XML document. You could technically, if you wanted to, view code, and you could actually see all that XML. Understand that with SQL 2012, they did change this XML, making it easier to merge packages together. That's one of their claim to fame that they're pretty happy about, the way they changed the XML in the new version. And thankfully, we have migration tools built in to the newer versions of the developer tools to help us with that. Let me go back to my slide here. So we had SSIS 2005, and if you have SQL Server 2005 packages today, you must edit them with BIDS 2005. Remember, BIDs can only be installed off of the installation media. So if you have the disk for SQL Server, whether it be Standard Edition or Enterprise, hopefully the best edition you have is, of course, Developer Edition. The Developer Edition has all the features of Enterprise, but it costs like $50. If you have that Developer Edition or Enterprise or even Standard Edition, on that disk was the option to install Business Intelligence Development Studio. If you still have to support those old projects, you have to find that installation media somewhere. You know, I had many students who say, I installed Visual Studio 2005 Enterprise Architect Edition or some of these Ultimate Edition or something. And you know what? Even if you install the biggest, most expensive version of Visual Studio, you wouldn't get the project templates for BIDs. That must come off the disk. And that rule applies to both 2005 and to 2008. 2008, if you're working with SQL 2008 or 2008 R2 edition, you must use BIDS 2008, which is really Visual Studio 2008 with the right project templates. Remember, folks, you know if BIDS installed. When you say File, New Project, and you see this guy right here, Business Intelligence Projects, you're gold. You got it. You're all set. But if that's missing, then you need to install it off the disk. Since I have SQL 2008 in my little VM, my little virtual machine environment that I'm showing you here, I have to have Visual Studio 2008. Now, whether I launch it on my Start menu, whether I launch it through SQL Server 2008 R2 Business Intelligence Development Studio, which is short for BIDS, or if I go into Microsoft Visual Studio and launch it that way, I'm running the exact same program, and it gives me those same project templates. It really doesn't matter. It's going to be this guy right here with that project template. All right, so we know in 2005 we used BIDS 2005. For 2008 R2 we used BIDS 2008, and you must have the correct version installed. You can't use BIDS 2008 to edit your 2005 packages unless you want to permanently upgrade them. So that, of course, is allowed. One thing really nice about BIDS 2005 and 2008, as I'm going to show you shortly here, folks, is that it did allow you to go ahead and edit your DTS 2000 packages, or if you wanted to execute them, you could still do that. Know that DTS 2000 is no longer supported with SQL 2012 and newer. There isn't even a migration tool anymore. They're just assuming that it never existed when you get into SQL 2012, so be aware of that if you still have some old SQL 2000 packages. And that brings us to our new set of tools. The new tools in SSIS are SSDT-BI. Now, why did they change the name? Just keep this in mind. We used to always call it BIDS for Business Intelligence Development Studio, but we're dealing with a team called Marketing. Marketing at Microsoft said we must change the name again. You see, they decided to name the developer or the database tools inside of Visual Studio to SQL Server Data Tools. That's cool. Understand that there is still SQL Server Data Tools that could be downloaded and installed for Studio 2010 and 2012. They finally just included it with Studio 2013. SSDT is a separate product that's used for designing and developing databases right within Visual Studio. That's not what you need. What you need is SSDT-BI. Okay, so we must remember to go to the SSDT-BI. This is a separate download altogether that's completely separate from SSDT. So please don't confuse the two. SSDT, great. If you just want to work with databases in Visual Studio, you can do that. But for doing the business intelligence projects with SSAS, IS, or RS, you're going to need SSDT-BI. And you can download it for, with SSDT-BI, you can download it for Studio 2012 or Studio 2013. The reason I'm telling you this is it's confusing, okay? Microsoft has not done a great job of making it clear what is available and which one you should use. If you still have the SQL Server 2012 media, or maybe you've downloaded the ISO file from Msdn, and you've got the media for, I would hope, the Developer Edition, or Enterprise or Standard, or the Business Intelligence Edition, you have access to a SSDT-BI for Visual Studio 2010. You see, if you go ahead and install it right off the disk, you'll end up with Studio 2010 installed on your machine with the right project templates. Even if you didn't have Visual Studio installed, it'll go ahead and install it for you with those project templates right off the SQL 2012 installation media. Understand that you cannot download that from the website. You can only install it off the disk. However, if you want to use the slightly newer version, updated for Visual Studio 2012, well, that is available for download. They do give you the SSDT-BI for Studio 2012. Know that it's meant to only work with SSIS 2012. There are specific compatibility requirements just for SSIS. If you want to work with SQL Server 2014, which has been released now for, let's say, a year, then you must use the SSDT-BI for Studio 2013. So let's make sure we get the right version of SSDT-BI installed. If you're using SQL 2012, you can use the one with Visual Studio 2012 that you download from Microsoft's site. Let me go back a slide. Or you can use the one that comes on the disk when you install SQL 2012. I would recommend, again, like I said, the Developer Edition in 2012. I would install that locally on my machine, and then it would automatically make sure I select that I want SSDT-BI installed as well. By the way, one of the things I found, not cool, but when I was using SSDT-BI just on my own machine, even today, with the developer or with the business intelligence tools, was the fact that I started getting an error all of a sudden that said method not found. Every time I tried to run a package, it would say, is Visual Studio 2012 Pro installed? It was checking for this method, and it was saying that it wasn't found, and it was an error, and it wouldn't let me have packages run. So then I found this cool article out on the web which showed me how I had to install a DLL into the GAC. If you're a .NET developer, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not, don't worry about it. It tells you exactly what to do in this command line option. And basically, I ran a special command line, and I had to change the quotes because I was copy-pasting it. But once I pasted it in there and installed it into the GAC, then everything worked. Let me go ahead and send this through the chat window for you guys as well, just as basic information. So you have those links if you're ever interested in, if you have that problem, or if you're interested in downloading the SSDT-BI tools. Folks, as I was saying, you know, I always, like I've been telling everybody, oh, you got to download the Developer Edition. If you go to Microsoft Store even, and I look for SQL Developer, like I said, the Developer Edition has everything that the Enterprise Edition, the full Enterprise, but it's licensed just for you and your machine. And look at that ridiculously low price. So if you were somebody who was like exploring on your own money, your own, your own coin, and you want to learn more about SQL Server, or you recommend to somebody, hey, you want to see everything that the full Enterprise Edition has, you can buy it from here for $59, or you can save like $4 and buy it on Amazon.com. Microsoft is very quick to remove the Developer Editions of previous versions of SQL Server, and they can be hard to come by, though. So just be aware that if you're looking for SQL 2012 Developer Edition, they're rare as hen's teeth. So understand that they'll only offer you the latest one. But it's something to know that it is available to you if you're interested. If you don't already have the Msdn subscription, which you can just download and install then. It even comes with its own serial number pre-pitted, as we like to say. It's already punched in, which is pretty cool. All right, let me continue on here. As I was saying, there's a strict compatibility issue with SSDT-BI. For example, for the one for Visual Studio 2013, one might immediately assume, oh, I can go work on packages for SQL 2012 or 2008 R2 as well, right? Notice the red dots in my little chart over on the right there. I ripped that off on one of the Msdn blog sites, but what that chart is showing us is only specific versions of SSDT-BI can work with certain versions of the packages. Notice that SSAS and Ssrs, no problem. We got green lights. We're happy about that. But specifically, you can see there's a red dot to the right of SSIS on SQL 2012 and a red dot to the right of SSIS on SQL 2008 R2 edition. You have to use the right version of it when working with packages installed in certain versions. And there's a little article about that, using the right version as well, right there as it specifies. And I'll just go ahead and put this quickly into the chat window. We can continue on. It's not going to be like this on every single web page, folks. I'll just copy this and send this through. There you go. By the way, like I said, when you install SSDT-BI, it always installs the appropriate version of Visual Studio. So if it's not there now, it'll install the shell. It's kind of interesting. You can actually go to Microsoft's site and you can download just the shell of Visual Studio 2013 or 2010 or 2012, and it does absolutely nothing because there's no project templates. And that's basically what it does, is it installs a shell and then it gives you the business intelligence templates, all when you install this tool. It's kind of big, by the way, when you download it. You might be surprised to find out. Like this one for 2014 is like a gig. and this one for 12 is like 800 meg. So they are rather large, but once they install, you have everything you need. All right, so here's some of the things we're going to talk about with SSDT-BI. We'll take a look at the new user interface that we're going to be working in the designer. We'll talk about the new cool SSIS toolbox, which is a different window than just the classic toolbox we used to use. There's a lot of updates to the IDE, the integrated development environment that we have. There's like the little SSIS tutorial section, there's parameters, and there's also updates to the Solution Explorer window. First up, look at that toolbox. The one on the left is the standard toolbox we had in BIDS 2005 and in BIDS 2008. It really didn't change. All the same shapes are on the left side when the toolbox is available inside of there. And what was confusing to a lot of the beginners, especially the students I have come to class who are totally new to SSIS, was they'd say, look at all these tasks in here, and there's a few containers at the top there, and I'd always try to point out, see that one that says data flow task? Remember, that's the most important task there is. All the other ones are just fluff. The data flow task is the one that does all of our ETL. And I'd always try to point out that it's so important, and yet it's obfuscated. It's hidden amongst all these other tasks. It is the most important task. Well, starting in SQL 2012, they actually added it to our favorite section. They know that it's the most important task. And with this new toolbox specific to SSIS, they gave us a little favorite section. With this favorite section, we can also go ahead and move the shapes up there if we'd like. And you can see some of the different tasks. Again, they all end in the same task name, and they're relatively the same as the ones we originally had. But we now have sections of our SSIS toolbox, folders, if you will, or tabs. So we have a common section, and we'll have the rest, but we also have a favorite section, which appears over on the left side. So if I switch over to Visual Studio, there we can see the official SSIS toolbox. Notice how Containers has a Containers section, and here's the most common ones that you're going to use over here on the right end of the designer on your control flow. Remember, the toolbox in SSIS is always smart enough to know what the heck we're looking at. If we're looking at control flow, show me a bunch of tasks or show me those containers. But if I switch over to data flow, then it wakes up and says, oh, okay, well, that means we want to use sources, destinations, and transformations. Right? It's smart enough to know that. And it's got a favorite section over here when we're on the data flow side of things as well. So we have the new toolbox, which organizes our different tasks for us. And I got to talk about Microsoft's theme of stripping all the color out of Visual Studio. It just seems like starting with Studio 2010 and then going beyond, they've continued to strip out all of the color in the designer. I mean, look at this. So if I go back over here to my virtual machine, notice the color that we have here. I've got, of course, I have colored precedent constraints, but notice the icons are colored. Look at my colorful toolbox with all these different shapes, and I've got a nice kind of a beige background, yellow folders here, toolbar buttons with all this color. And then you go over to Studio 2012, and it's like, we have different shades of gray here. So we got black, we got gray, and then we have white, and all the icons have been changed to monochrome. And Microsoft's really hard-pressed to do this, and I don't know exactly why. I mean, they must have had to pull some strings just to get that little blue or a little yellow on some of these icons, which is just amazing how little color is available now in the new designer. I don't necessarily agree with it. I actually like the different colors, especially I thought it made it easier for people who are learning SSIS, but that's just the way it is starting with SQL 2012 and newer. So when you're working in SSDT-BI, you're not going to see those same colorful icons. I always told beginner developers, learn the icons, because you'll memorize what for example, what the data flow task looks like. And now you can see we have new icons to learn. As a matter of fact, and I mentioned this right here on my slide, there is actually a bug in SSDT-BI, and it hasn't been fixed yet, that's not going to allow you to change the font color of your text annotations. So when I look at my designer over here, let's just show you this. Here's my Birch one. Notice I have it as green. Sometimes I'll put these annotations right here in my designer just to explain what's happening, and I might use green text for the happy path, which goes down the left side, and then red text maybe will be there to describe the sad path when things crash and burn, right? Well, I can't do any of that with SSDT-BI because they've set so many rules of stripping the color out, I think. I don't know what really happened, but no matter what color you try to set it to, you get black. Or if you change the whole background to black, it turns white. See, if I go ahead and try to change my font color, oh, hey, I got it on green. Let's change it to bright red for the sad path. It'll allow me to change the font size and color and all that good stuff, but it stays black. And this is actually a bug that's been reported up there on the Microsoft Connect site right here. It's always black. And by the way, if you do change your theme in Visual Studio to dark with light editor, your annotations actually vanish completely and you can't see any of them. So that's another bug that has been reported to Connect. There's been quite a few bugs with the new designer, and so they've been working on them slowly. Sounds like some of them they've been letting go until the next version of Visual Studio, which I'm not very happy about, but that's what they've been doing with some of these bugs. And these are all on the Connect site, of course, about with the different bugs and features that have been reported. And they're kind of interesting to read how other people are experiencing the same thing and having different comments about all of that. There you go. I just sent that through the chat window for you guys. And yeah, there you can see the side-by-side comparison of the different shapes. One of the things I noticed as well is that you don't have to be nearly as accurate when you're lining your shapes up in the new SSDT-BI. Like back over here in this world in 2008 on the left side of the screen, we had to be exact in order to get perfectly straight arrows or they're always bent. And we got to be masters of using the Format drop-down menu. It's not nearly that particular over here on the right. So for example, if I just go ahead and grab a shape and I just move it over slightly, it just keeps a straight line and says, yeah, that's close enough, right? And yet if I did really want to, I can go ahead and lasso some of these guys, and I can still use that famous Format menu, so I can go ahead and align them on the centers. You want to keep your packages nice and orderly and friendly to read and understand and maintain, right? And they're not as particular now with the arrows, which is nice. I have had some problems where some of my shapes were zoomed off to the side and I couldn't get them back on without actually doing an auto format or an auto layout. And that's been a bug that's also been reported where some of the shapes sometimes just disappear off the screen. So try to watch out for that. But the format menu is something we always want to use when we're formatting our shapes. And we have totally different icons for this. One other, complaint, disabling shapes. Like over on the left side there, you can see that that task is actually gray in the background. That's because it's been officially disabled. One of the things you can do in bids while you're developing, let's say you have a task that takes 10 minutes and you're just trying to finish your development, you can right-click an individual task or container and disable it. And it looks pretty obvious that it's disabled. But if you do that in the new SSDT, the only thing that changed gray is the little tiny text. And a lot of developers are a little upset about that. They can barely tell it's disabled at all. So be aware of that as well. When you disable a task, you'll have to pay special attention to make sure you re-enable it. It's real easy to overlook the fact that it's been disabled because only the text has been turned gray. Not to be a negative Nelly, that's just wanted to point those out. When you start up with SSDT-BI, you do get this really cool Getting Started window, and that shows up right inside of SSDT. You get this little window here, and it says, hey, here's how some samples to get you going on what the control flow is and data flow. And you click on those, and here I'm opening it on I-11, and it shows me I can go ahead and download this, which is cool that I can download it. And then I'm getting media failure in IE, and that's something about the fact that the WMV file is not able to play. I tried loading this page in other browsers, and it says, oh, you need to have Silverlight installed. And it's like, really? So I would recommend downloading the WMV. Then you can use your local media player if you want to play those. But it's pretty cool. You can download it, and it's nice little tutorials that are available. As always, I also recommend for anything, if you're ever interested in MicrosoftVirtualAcademy.com, this is another free training site that a lot of people go to. It's got free tutorials and videos online, and they would probably have some stuff about SSIS. I haven't actually looked at that yet, but we call it MVA. You can always check that out as well. Really cool thing about MVA, if you're interested in getting certified in whether it be business intelligence or programming in C# or web development, know that we have to recertify every 2 years if you're an MCSD, or every 3 if you're an MCSE. They're saying that recertification can now be done completely through Microsoft Virtual Academy. So you just take these 3 online tutorials and pass all the tests, tell them about it, and you're now recertified, which is pretty awesome. It doesn't cost a dime. This is free training too. So I love that. I always share that with everybody. Okay. The Parameters tab. This is something you didn't see inside of bids. If I go back over here to bids, we've got 5 tabs: Control, Data Flow, Event Handler, Package Explorer, Execution Result. But when I go over to SSDT-BI, I have 6 tabs, and that's because of this guy right here. This leads to the biggest change that's occurred with SSIS 2012, and that's our new deployment model, where we can deploy an entire project. And if we want any custom settings that can be set from outside of the package, those are called parameters. And so they allow us to define parameters here, even with default values. And then when somebody goes to execute our package, they can either accept our default value, or they can choose to override it if they'd like. We can also choose whether or not the data is sensitive. And if we change it to true, it'll actually be encrypted. Notice it shows up as stars now. Or, here's the other cool thing. There's a required property here. If this is set to true, then nobody can run our package unless they pass in a value, right? Especially if this is empty. Then they have to assign something to it, or it will not run our package even. This parameter section here, though, is just for this one package, which I have a very unimaginable name here. It's just package.dtsx. But understand everything under the parameters tab here is just for this one package. Over in the Solution Explorer, I can also define parameters that apply to several packages. I have a parameter section here, which you can just double click. And if you do that, you can define parameters that can be applied to all your packages. I can also do that with connection managers. That's why they put this all here in the project. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but it's all part of the deployment model because all of these files, such as parameters, connection managers, and packages, are all zipped up into a single binary file called an ispack, and that's what's used to be deployed. So we have our parameters tab, and that's where we can store settings that are just for our package, and they can be configured when somebody goes to configure our package, once it's been deployed even, or when they're actually executing it. So our Solution Explorer has definitely changed as well, right? Taking a look on the left side there, you can see where we used to have data sources and data views. Those are gone, and those were kind of like weird, mysterious folders that people didn't fully understand sometimes. Basically, if you defined yourself a data source here at the project level, inside of your package, you could create a data source like a connection manager that used one of those connection strings. And then if you ever went back up to the data source and changed it here, up here in data sources, it would automatically push that change to all your packages that were in your project. It's kind of like an automatic wizard that ran in the background. I don't think a lot of developers used it. Some developers did, obviously, when they figured it out, but it was never very clear how they worked. Data sources and data source views are both gone now, and instead what we have are project parameters and connection managers. And these are at the project level. We still have connection managers, of course, at the package level. Like if I'm looking at my, let's go back to my package here, and I click on control flow, I still got my connection managers down here, right? I still have all of those, but I can also create one up here at the project level, and it tells me that by putting the word project next to it. And so if I change that up here, that could affect several different packages that might exist in my SSIS packages folder. There is a special folder here as well called miscellaneous. Anything else I add to my project that doesn't have the file extension of .params, .dtsx, or .con manager, if it doesn't have one of those three file extensions, it automatically gets thrown into miscellaneous. So if I right-click on my project and add existing item, it doesn't end with one of those three file extensions, it'll magically appear in miscellaneous as you saw in mine. You can see how I've got class1.cs and task.txt. You're probably not going to have those types of files in yours, but you might have a Word doc in there that explains how your packages run, how they work together, or maybe an image, or anything else that you want to include with your packages. They're all going to be compiled together into an ispack, and they're going to be deployed together. So, some of the bug fixes. Here's the next section, guys. Bug fixes that were fixed with SS 2012, as well as features dropped. First up we got to talk about is the variables window. You know, as a developer myself working with SSIS, one of my favorite add-ons that every SSIS developer should be using is called BIDS Helper. Maybe you've heard of BIDS Helper, maybe you've been using it for years, maybe you haven't heard of BIDS Helper. It's a completely free add-on for Visual Studio, which of course that's what BIDS is, and SSDT-BI, and it adds additional features, additional menu options, and additional things that were missing inside of BIDS. And starting with this version of SSIS, specifically with 2012, we now have the ability to go ahead and take a variable and move it to a different scope. When you're working inside of the designer here, and you happen to create a brand new variable, where's my variables window? Right here. If I happen to go ahead and create a brand new variable by choosing add variable, I have to be careful. like what's currently selected. So if I'm looking at this package and I say new variable, you can see it's at the package level for scope. And of course, I can't just exactly go ahead and move that to be at a task level or a container level. Well, one of the cool new features they finally gave us now is I can go ahead and, well, that's the bids helper version, but I can go ahead and modify that variable. So with that selected, I can move that variable to a different scope. So I can have it so it's not declared at the package level, but instead I can choose to have that only at the execute process task, or if I had a container such as a sequence container, I could move it to that level instead. And that actually allows me to move it to that scope. Notice how it magically disappeared? Well, that's because I actually have to choose that task, and then it's back because it's at that scope now. See, that's the thing about the variables. We know that they run in a certain scope of the different tasks, or package level or a container level. Well, they only show up if I select that. They did change this. It used to be it had a couple of icons to show system variables and all user variables, but now I can move that. I got to tell you guys, that's still not perfect though. It's great that they allow me to move a variable, but they still don't allow me to copy a variable. And Bids Helper, see, it gave me this extra menu option. It allows me, if I don't know if I can launch it, but I have to select something. I can actually go ahead and click on that, and they give me a choice if I want to copy or move. So I can choose to copy it or move it, which is kind of cool. So I can have it declared in two locations. And regular SSDT-BI doesn't give me the choice to copy. It only allows me to move. Again, even if I'm going to leave Bids Helper installed, and I'm going to just make sure I install the right one, because it does give me add-ons for not only SSIS, but also Ssrs and SSAS if I'm working in a multidimensional mode. There's also a new expression builder for our variables. Variables, of course, can be assigned a simple value like a string or an integer or something, but sometimes you want it to be a calculation or some kind of an expression. And there's an expression builder now also available. Again, something else that Bids Helper gave us. You'll notice the one from Bids Helper actually has color in it versus the one that's stock with SSDT-BI doesn't have any color. And yes, you can turn on more variables in the variables window. You can turn on more columns, let me say. You can see things such as the namespace, data type value, raise event when variable changes. You can set that on as well. And we can see description and expression. So for Bids Helper itself, see the codeplex.com. Codeplex is Microsoft's open source website. And here you can go ahead and download this free add-on. You can just go ahead and make sure you get the right version though, folks. They're continuing to call it Bids Helper even though it's not called Bids anymore. And that's fine. Just make sure you get the right one. If you're 2014, 2012, or you're 2005 or 2008, get the right tool, and can't be beat for the price. So I'll send that to the chat one in case you guys are interested. I know it's a lot of stuff to the chat window, but why not? All right. Guys, remember on the data viewer on the data flow side of things where we could choose to add any one of these 4 different types of data viewers? You choose grid, which showed you the data. Then they had these ones for numbers, like histogram, scatter plot, and column chart. Well, starting with 2012, they got rid of these. They said you only get the grid and that's it, and you can only add one. It's kind of hard to see here, but you could add any number of data viewers you wanted, and they show up with the little glasses on your data flow side, and you could watch the data as it went through. Now they only give you the grid type. They got rid of the other 3, assuming nobody used them. And you don't even get this dialog box that I'm showing you. This is what you get now. If you right-click on that data flow path, you can enable data viewer. Okay, that's it. So you go ahead and enable or you disable, and a little icon will show up on the line, of course. A little bit different than the last one. But you don't get to choose from any of the 4 now. That's another thing that did change in SQL 2012, just so you guys are aware of that. I guess, most of the time, all I ever used was the grid one anyways, so I'm not really feeling much pain there, but I can imagine some people who were all about the scatter plot, looking for patterns and numbers, they might be a little upset by that. We don't really have that. Okay. Some other features, AutoConnect was removed from the control flow and the data flow. AutoConnect, a lot of people didn't really use it, but what it allowed you to do is double-click a task or a transformation in the toolbox and have it automatically be connected and appeared in the designer. That's actually gone now with SQL 2012 and newer. So understand that AutoConnect is removed. A lot of people didn't even use it anyways, but what you could do is if you selected a particular shape, let me just see if I can do this now, I'll just wing it. And with that one selected, I should be able to double-click this one, and then what it would do is it would add it, and it would connect it. See, it's not even enabled by default, so a lot of people aren't even missing it. But if you did have it enabled, it would be under Tools and under Options. And right here under Control Flow Auto Connect, you have to actually check the box to enable this. And it would use a success constraint for on the control flow versus a data flow. It would use the to the left of the selected shape. All of this is gone anyways. Starting with SSDT-BI for 2012, you can't use this feature. So I guess that's not that big of a deal. Execute DTS 2000 package task is missing from the SSIS toolbox because starting with 2012, they're pretending that there was no such thing as DTS back in those days. It's 15 years later since DTS 2000 was released. If you need to upgrade your existing DTS 2000 packages, I would suggest you stick with SQL 2008 R2 edition with BIDS 2008. That's the only thing you can use to even upgrade your old packages. The upgrade wizard's gone. The upgrade advisor for DTS 2000 packages is gone. Also, another thing that's gone is the ActiveX script task. Back over here in the old BIDS, right over here, if I go back to my control flow, we used to have this ActiveX script task here, which allowed you to write script in, pick your language, right, your poison. You want to use JScript or VBScript, and it allowed you to move your old VBScript from your old DTS packages in here, so you didn't have to rewrite it. This guy's gone as well, so there really is no VBScript or JScript allowed inside of your packages anymore. Certainly in SSDT, we do have in the SSIS toolbox the good old-fashioned script task, which allows you to write .NET code, but I'm talking about the old DTS ways where we did everything in VBScript or JScript. We don't have support for it anymore, and you will not find the ActiveX script task anywhere inside of here. Again, pretending that DTS never existed now. So there is a nice little list of some of the discontinued features, if you're curious, that I've been talking about here. Let's go ahead and grab that and just send it through the chat window for you guys. Yeah, this is right off the Msdn page, so it's not like I found some secret blog or something for this information. There you go. You can take a look at that. Those are just the discontinued features. Renaming a package no longer prompts you to rename the package object as well. This is just a nuisance thing, right? If you guys remember, whenever you added a package inside of BIDS, you oftentimes had to rename it, or otherwise you end up with dumb names like package 1, package 2, package 3. So if I go ahead and add a new package, and then I turn around and say, oh, I'd like to rename that, please, to something practical. I'll just call this load sales DW. It says, oh, okay, now this is always another process problem we had back in BIDS. We'd always get this annoying bug that says it's being used by something. So what you'd have to do is make sure you saved all files, wait a long enough time, and then try again. And then eventually it would allow you to rename it. Apparently it's not going to let me do that. Maybe I have to close it completely even. But anyways, this is the last time, third time's the charm, right? It always asks you also if you'd like to rename the internal name. There you go, the package object as well. This is the internal name that's in the XML of the package, and we, as a best practice, we're always told, say yes, say yes, say yes. Well, now it doesn't even ask us about this anymore. This is something that SSDT-BI doesn't do. It just says, yeah, I'll rename it, and you're good to go. They've also added it so you can undo your changes up to 20 actions. So they've added to the queue in memory, so you can Control Z to back up. If something accidentally gets selected and moved, and you didn't want it to, and you start to continue working, and you realize, oh, geez, I just totally screwed it up, you can Control Z all the way back out up to 20 actions, which is nice. They also allow grouping on the data flow side of things. Remember, grouping doesn't really do anything, right? All that grouping does is it allows you to group a bunch of related shapes, allows you to collapse or expand them, draw a line around them, and give them a meaningful name. Grouping has nothing to do with transactions, variable scope, or anything else. I think grouping is underutilized. Folks, as SSIS developers, we should not always be reaching for the sequence container, because that brings a lot of extra overhead with it. Well, I got to worry about variable scope and transaction control and all this other stuff. If you just simply want a delineation of your shapes from the other ones, grouping is a much lighter, more effective way of doing that. But that's all that grouping can do. Grouping is extremely lightweight. here's what grouping is, right? If you go back into here and I decide, oh, for this whole batch right here, I might right-click and choose to group that. Now, make sure you don't select starting with precedent constraint, but you should be able to just choose to group them. And that gives them a name. You can give it a better name, like loading group or something. And then you can go ahead and collapse it and save on screen real estate. And then I could have, if there was something else, it would show up down below. This is all that grouping does, right? There's no properties for it. It's not a real task. It's not a host at all. And you can always choose to ungroup it and just let it spill out everywhere. Well, now starting with this version, guys, we can do that over here on the data flow. So if you want to grab your middle components and group these guys, you can. You just right-click and choose to group them. So that's something else that's kind of new and cool inside of within SSDT-BI. We can group on the data flow side of things. Folks, if you're using the old SSDT-BI for Studio 2010, your script tasks and your script components only support .NET 4.0. No big deal. That's what we're expecting, right? Because we're using 2010. However, if you're using the newer ones, they support .NET 4.0 and 4.5. Not really much of an issue here, but if you do upgrade it to use the .NET 4.5 features, you can't go back and for example, edit that task or script component with Studio 2010. If you happen to have both of them installed side by side, you're going to be locked into using 2012 if you change the .NET version to 4.5. This is just another one of those warnings I found online, and I wanted you guys to be aware of it. You can change the version of .NET that you're using with your script task and script components. So make sure you stick to 4.5 or 4.0 if you need to support the older Studio 2010, the one that comes on the disk for Visual Studio or for SQL Server 2012. Debugging breakpoints. This is pretty cool as well. We know that we can debug and use breakpoints inside of our script task. We've been able to do that in the old BIDS days, but we were never able to debug over in our script components on the data flow side of things. Remember, folks, when we're working inside of Visual Studio, the control flow generally only executes once, right? This executes once, top down, because I've got my arrows pointing down, but it executes once unless I'm using the for each container or the for loop container. The data flow side is going to execute for every single record that's read from the source and pumped through. This is going to execute as many times as necessary. But up until recently, we've never been able to actually debug our script components, and now we can. We can actually set breakpoints in here and watch one record at a time come in here and see how they're being transformed by our custom code. We can also debug our custom script task. The script component, can actually be a transformation, a source, or a destination. While any one of those three, you can now set breakpoints and step into it. The only thing I got to caution you about is setting breakpoints now inside of script components and script tasks. It just seems to be a performance killer. I mean, if I set a breakpoint in here and hit start debug, it just takes a long time. And eventually it opens up the Vista editor, which is the Visual Studio Tools for applications, the script editor. And eventually it loads up, and then I can start debugging my code. And it just seems to be a little slower than what BIDS was always when I worked with BIDS in the past. But it still works, and now I can debug here on the data flow. This can be really handy if I have some custom transformations happening inside of here. So in other words, if I open this guy up and I click on Edit Script inside of here, because it's a transformation, it's going to be much more complex than a script task. And then I take a sip from coffee because I'm waiting for it to load. Here we go. Something's loading up. You can see I got my main.cs buffer wrapper. There we go. And then inside of here, you scroll down here because this is the one I really want to debug usually. This is where I'm going to process my input rows as they're coming in. Okay. And here I can set a breakpoint, and then I can start a debug session, and I'll actually step in here and I can see through this row object as it comes in, I can see all the little values. It'll expand out. If I hover over row, there'll be a plus sign with a little grid, and I can see every one of the columns that are coming in, which is pretty cool. And I can debug it. Okay. Remember, this didn't seem to be a problem for me when I did this, but it's still a lot of problem for a lot of developers. Remember that if you want to debug script, whether it be a script task or a script component, you might need to change your project to run in 32-bit mode. Like if you go right-click your project and choose Properties, go to the debugging section on the left side, and then you'll see it says run 64-bit runtime. If you have a 64-bit operating system that you installed all your tools on, it's probably going to say true, and you actually have to change this to false to make sure your package is running in 32-bit mode if you want debugging to work. This is one of the most overlooked things that developers will struggle with and burn hours trying to figure out. They can't seem to hit their breakpoints inside of the script task or script transformation. No, and the reason is you got to run in 32-bit mode because Visual Studio is still an x86 application. It's still 32-bit. I made a little joke there. What year is this? Wow. Wow standing for Windows on Windows. That's a pun. Windows on Windows, of course, is when you run a 32-bit app on a 64-bit operating system. You're running in a 32-bit emulation mode. So, anyways, yeah, so make sure you change that to 32-bit mode. You probably already do this anyways if you've been developing SSIS packages. Like, for example, if you ever have to communicate with Excel or Access and you have to use the old JET driver, that JET driver, if you don't have the 64-bit edition installed of the JET driver, then you have to make sure your packages are running in 32-bit, or you can't write to Excel or read or write from Excel or read or write to Access or anything else using that JET provider. So you always had to make sure your packages, while you're developing, ran in 32-bit mode, but also when you moved them off to be run in production. Okay. We have some new data source and data destination wizards in Visual Studio. When we're working in Visual Studio, you'll see that they show up right at the top under our Favorites section. Data Source Assistant and Data Destination Assistant. When you double-click any one of these, nice thing about them is they'll show you which ones are currently supported by your system. I could also select existing connection managers, but notice if I uncheck which ones are installed, then they'll show me all of them, right? And you might think, well, why would I ever choose like Sybase or SAP if it's not installed, SAP? Well, you can actually disable your connection managers so that during package validation, they're not going to be all upset that they're not installed. That's another feature that's available. But it's nice to see what is installed and what's not. And you can use these assistants, but you can always just scroll down and just choose your sources and destinations when you're working on the data flow. They're right here, okay? And something else I think this is alluding to on our slides here is we have the new Odbc data sources and Odbc data destinations. Folks, one of the things that's kind of exciting for developers is we now can connect to other types of databases using the Odbcs. You remember doing this? Geez, I remember doing this in NT4 days. We'd have to establish a DSN, and then we would use that to connect to our database. Originally, Microsoft was going to tell us, hey, don't use OLEDB anymore for highest performance, use Odbc. But unfortunately, the Odbc driver, the sources and destinations can be a little bit buggy. Like, for example, from what I've read, I found an article from Jamie Thompson, which is like one of the most famous bloggers on SSIS out there right now. As suggested by Jamie, it only recognizes user DSNs, not the system DSNs. And also make sure you're clear that there's x86 DSNs and 64-bit DSNs. They're completely different, and if you don't have the right one, you're not going to be able to find your connection string, and you're not going to be able to connect to your database. Anyways, Odbc was the original way that we used to connect to databases before there ever was OLEDB. And Odbc, which stands for Open Database Connectivity, I think, or Object Database Connectivity, it was the original way that we used to connect as an API to databases. And they're bringing it back. And they're suggesting that we start to consider that. And sometimes it'll allow us to actually connect to really other types of databases that normally SSIS could not connect to. We'd always have to try to either conjure up an OLEDB provider or create our own. And now we have support for Odbc for sources and destinations. And that's a new feature with SQL 2012 SSIS. I'm going to go ahead and send this article because I thought what I really liked were the comments from other people talking about, oh, here's where I had some pain points on this, and I thought this would be pretty good for you guys who are SSIS developers. But yeah, it was even talking about how it was recommended by Microsoft we stop using OLEDB. Folks, remember, we don't want to use the ADO.NET one. If you're a .NET developer, you might assume that's always going to be the fastest. You only want to use the ADO.NET provider if you are programming against it, ADO.NET destination or source. Usually you get higher performance using the OLEDB one, and it's still the one that's recommended today if you're programming against SQL Server or Oracle or DB2. You want to use OLEDB. If you know for a fact your package is running on the destination, then SQL Server destination might give you a little bit better performance. Okay? Use that destination instead of OLEDB, but only if your package is running on the destination machine for SQL Server. Large data sources. One of the things to be aware of is that starting in SQL Server 2008, Microsoft added a feature called Change Data Capture. For example, imagine you have a data warehouse of 5 million records, and you want to move the data over to your data mart every day. Every night it happens, or every 4 hours. But you don't want to move all 5 million records every night. You just want to move the changed records. CDC was something that was added into the Enterprise Edition of SQL Server 2008. You have to use these special Transact-Sql commands in SSMS. So in other words, you have to open up this guy here, and create a brand new query. And what you'll do is you'll actually type in your command here to enable CDC. There's a certain command you can type in. You can search the web to find it, or Msdn, and it would actually enable change data capture on your server. Then you could actually choose to turn it on at the per table level. Now, it doesn't actually modify the database or the table necessarily, but it actually adds a special entry to the logging system so that you can actually pull out information about any insert, updates, or deletes that might happen in that table. See, wouldn't it be great if you had to move data from your OLTP database over to your OLAP database and you only wanted to move the changes? That's exactly what this can do for you, CDC. Now, with SSIS 2008, we didn't really have much support for this. We'd have to write our own custom scripts, and maybe we'd find a third-party component that could help us out, which worked with this special transaction log, the log sequence number, or using a date-time column to find out when a record did change for inserts, update, and deletes. But starting at SSIS 2012, we've got 3 new shapes that can simplify using CDC. So this is a reason to move to SSIS 2012. We could take advantage of this one Cdc Control Task. This can be helpful in determining which records should be selected from our data sources. And then over on the data flow side of things, I love this that we've got a CDC source, again, there's something that can be used for just pulling it out with that SLN information. But we've also got a CDC Splitter. So when we take in the record, the splitter can look, was this an insert, an update, or delete? Because I'm going to send it to one of these 3 different transformation paths, right, or destinations even. I can use a special CDC Splitter that's available over on the transformation sides as well, which can be pretty handy. So these are some of the new shapes that are added in with SSIS 2012 to better support change data capture. Folks, I got to reemphasize this again. Yeah, you're going to have it in Developer Edition, but it requires Enterprise in your production server, okay? So if you only have Standard Edition or I don't know about Business Intelligence Edition, but I'd have to check that out. But it is a feature that is only with the Enterprise. This can save you a lot of work for identifying just those change records and just moving much less records into your destination database. They also added the data quality services transformation. There's a new transformation on the data flow side, and this works for the official data quality server. You may have heard about the data quality server. This was a feature that came out with SQL 2012, and this can be used for cleansing the data as it's being pumped through the package. Make sure that the data is valid. For example, it might be validating address information. Is that a valid state? With DQS, if you do a little bit of studying with DQS, you can learn more about how it's working and how you can set up your own server and how you can set up your own rules for types of data. This can help you maintain higher data integrity. And of course, the better the quality of the data, the easier it is to transform and the better everything else runs on the data. They do have a little bit of information here, just working with DQS. That is something that I do cover in that class from Microsoft, the 2463 class, the 5-day one, but not in the 3-day class. I don't cover it, but we do have a chapter of it in the other one. If you're interested in DQS, we talk about that. We have you actually create a DQS server and configure it. Deployment. Remember the classic deployment models we used to have, package store, file system, and with SQL Server, the MSDB database, they're still supported with SSIS 2012 and 2014. Know that nothing has changed with that older deployment model. You still have that. But you can also deploy to this new deployment model, which they recommend for all your new projects, where you'll actually create a special database called SSIS-DB. Now, you don't actually create the database yourself just by right-clicking and saying New Database. Instead, when you open up SSMS, you'll connect to the database engine. And then you'll see there'll be a folder here that says Information Services Catalogs. That's all that's going to be there. And what you need to do is right-click on that guy, and you'll say, I need to create a database. It'll prompt you for a very special password. Whatever you type in, don't lose it, because that password is actually going to be used for encrypting all the sensitive data that's stored in your database. So it'll ask you for the password, you'll enter it twice, and then this database will officially be created. When it creates that database, it'll actually enable .NET, the CLR inside of your database engine. If it wasn't enabled, it will enable it. Otherwise, if it was enabled, everything's going to be cool already. Like I said, it'll prompt you for that password to encrypt the data that's stored inside of it, the sensitive data. Once created, you can create one or more folders to hold your projects. Like here, I created 2 folders. In this little picture here, I've got test projects and I've got reload sales DW. Those are 2 different folders that I created. Underneath those folders, and I can create as many folders as I want, of course, but underneath there, I've got projects and environments. Projects and environments. So for projects, for example, I can choose to install as many SSIS projects inside of there. When I say SSIS project, I'm talking about this guy right here. He's a project. He's going to contain all the packages, any miscellaneous files, any project level connection managers, and project parameters. Folks, when I right-click on this guy and I choose build or rebuild, it doesn't matter. All my files are getting packed into this special little ispack file. All of those are being compressed and put in an ispack. You see, this ispack file is nothing more than a zip file with a different file extension. You can actually rename this back to zip to see what's inside of there if you're interested. But anyways, this ispack file, now that it's gathered up all my packages and they're all put in a single binary file, this is what I can use to load it and install it into my production server. So back over here, I can choose my project and I can choose to deploy project. You can see I've got Integration Services Project 4 already installed with my one goofy package right here, but it's underneath the project section. And I can choose to deploy more projects. This name right here that you're looking at is kind of misleading. See, when I think of deploy project from here, that means I'm going to push it from here, right? And in reality, I'm not. I'm actually going to go browse to go find my ispack file and bring it back in here. So this is a misleading name. The other option they have here for import packages, well, that's not very clear either. That really, if you open that up, that's to migrate your existing packages from the old 2008 or 2005 packages that need to migrate in and be imported. So if I click on Next, I can go ahead and find them. Hey, do you want to grab those that are already deployed to your old file system or your MSDB database and SQL Server? Or your old, the package store location, you know, which is a specific path under program files. See, the import one actually will bring in those older packages that have been deployed to the file system and so forth and install them into your SSIS database. Or you can choose to deploy project, which is going to have you either grab that deployment file, which is, hey, let's look for the ispack file. And you can see I've got the ispack file. It's looking for that right now. Or I can actually choose another SSIS installation and grab its whole catalog and bring that on in, which is kind of cool. That's a fast way to deploy multiple packages from one server to another. By the way, take a look at that. You saw that wizard that showed up. What if I right-click here and choose deploy? This is what we used to do in the old days, back in bids. Well, it brings up the same wizard. And again, validating everything, I can still choose where I'm going to select source. Am I going to do a ispack file or a catalog, right? So it brings up the same wizard anyways. And I think I've basically walked through that, and this is what my slide has. There is something else available. Yeah, choose your ispack file. Note that once it's been deployed, you can right-click on your package. And it's not a coincidence, guys. We see parameters and connection managers showing up. And even though they might have default values here, I can choose to override those. I can override them now that they've been installed to change them, or I can choose to just override them for a single execution of the package, whether it be connection manager information or parameters. For variables, though, they have these things called environments, and that's the other half of the picture here. This little environment section, you can think of it as a way of installing environment variables. So if I double-click on that, there's really not much to this dialog box other than a list of variables. and I can choose exactly what variable I want to have as an environment variable so that when a package runs, it can pick up these environment variables from this particular project section. Well, from this folder, I should say. So I've got this environment, and I can choose multiple environments under here if I'd like, all under this folder for test packages. And this is where I can define environment variables that can be picked up by the package when it's run. So if I deploy my package to like 3 different types of servers here, dev1, test1, and prod1, I can have different environment variables picked up from each one of those servers. So the package will be completely identical. The package will be identical in those 3 different locations, but they'll be pulling out different values for the environment variables from those locations as well. That's a great way of making sure that my packages are dynamic. Last few things here, folks. Transact-Sql, we can use TSQL, not just SQL, but TSQL, to manage our SSIS packages. This is a scripting language, of course, that will actually allow me to start a package running via script. Like, can you imagine this? What if you had a stored procedure that was running, and then when it was done, you wanted it to launch an SSIS package? You can do that now. You can go ahead and execute a package using Transact-Sql. You can go ahead and validate a package, and you can do other types of tests with your packages. You can pass in parameter values as you execute them to Transact-Sql. That's one of the cool new features with SQL 2012. This used to require a lot of careful hacking and maybe custom tool development to go ahead and pull this off, but now it can actually be done. Maybe you need a package to run based on a trigger, you know? I mean, that's something that's possible. There's another feature that is a pretty cool feature. It's called a data tab. Again, using Transact-Sql to do this. You can have a package that's running. You can actually take that current package and grab a subset of the records and actually take one or more of the columns and write it off to a special file. So as a package is running, and if you just want to see a subset of the data, or maybe you want to see all of it, you can use a special command to do this. You can say, I'd like to add a data tap to that. It's like tapping a maple tree to get the sap out, except we're going to tap a running package, specifically one of its data flows between the 2 different transformations, and we're going to grab that data, and we're going to write it off to a file that we can go ahead and look at on a production server. Excuse me. All you have to specify is the execution ID, which data flow path between which of the transformations, of course, number of rows you want to capture, including all if you really want, and the file where you want to save the data off. It'll be completely separate, and it'll save that information off, and you can actually look at the data to make sure the transformation is running correctly. Again, all through, you know, catalog.addDataTop stored procedure. You're calling a stored procedure to do this. They have a neat little article about how to do that. This is on Msdn, of course, how to add a data tap. But it reminds me of a data viewer, but this is in a production environment, saving it off to a file that I can peruse at my own speed and if I'm interested in. You know, data viewers only work inside of Visual Studio, and of course they're disabled completely on a production environment. But if I want to take a look at an existing running package and grab some of that data, and if I have the rights, I can add this data tab. DTExec, the classic command line utility. Guys, you know there's 2 of them, right? There's the 32-bit and the 64-bit one. So whenever we run a package from the command line, we have to make sure we're running the right one. If you run the one in the program files x86 folder, you're running the 32-bit one. You want to make sure you're always running the 64-bit whenever possible, unless you have a 32-bit operating system. DTExec UI has not been updated yet. It's like Microsoft just dropped the ball with this utility. This is still a 32-bit style application, and it has no idea or concept of the new package store, or the new, I should say, package catalog system, the database, whereas DTExec was updated. So if you want to use this command line, and you can actually specify which of the SSIS-DB databases you want to use, go for it. So just be careful about DTExec UI. The only time I ever use DTExec UI is if I want to build up a command line, but now that it doesn't even know about using these databases, the SSIS databases, I don't think I'll even use it for that. So that's just a tool to be aware of. They've got all new reports for our packages that are installed in the database. You can see my menu option here. You just choose Reports, Standard Reports. These are something that show up right in SSMS. It doesn't open up a browser or any SSRS style reports. They just show up right inside of SSMS, SQL Server Management Studio, and you can see all the executions, all the validations or operations or connections that may have occurred. So we have these new reports that are available as well. Yes, there are still more add-on reports that can be used with SSRs, but hey, these are built right in, so it's just something to be aware of. Oh, the other thing, folks, what's coming in 2016? Not that much. So if you get the gist of how 2012 works, going to 2014 and 2016, no real revolutionary changes so far. I think we're on Community Technology Preview number 2, CTP2, for the version of SQL 2016 that's available right now that you can download and install. There's just a few things that have been added so far. Obviously, SSDT-BI is going to be on Visual Studio 2015. There's going to be support for if you have multiple servers, if you have a failover, multiple nodes. They're adding in always-on support for our packages. So for our database, for SSISDB database, it'll be treated like all the other databases, so it's going to be in an always-on availability group, which is pretty cool. Incremental deployment's kind of interesting. If you want, you can take a look at an existing ICE pack, and instead of just always installing the whole thing, you'll be able to check and uncheck certain boxes to choose exactly what it is you want to install on a server. So you can say, I just want to grab those 2 packages in that project and that one connection manager and that one parameter, but nothing else. So you can choose a selection of the members of an entire project. That's something that they've said they've added, and I've actually seen a screenshot of that. It looks pretty cool. Project upgrades, of course. For project upgrades, it will maintain project connection managers. So if you open up a project for a SQL 2014, it'll upgrade and maintain all your connection managers for 2016. Apparently, this was an issue when we do the upgrade from 2012 to 2014. That was it, folks. What I have here is a big old thank you. If you're still on, that's really cool. Thank you very much. I do have some other information I'm going to send through the chat window here. I hope it hasn't taken up too much of your time here. I kind of ran through a bunch of stuff in about an hour and 15, but you can always review these slides as well. I'm going to send these links here. These are some other interesting. There's just so much new that I couldn't cover everything, but I wanted to keep it interesting and entertaining here. So I'll send this through the chat window as well. Everything that's in the chat window, you should be able to select it, copy it, and paste it into Word or a Notepad or Wordpad or Notepad++ or some other tool for your own personal notes if you'd like. You can get to these links. Otherwise, you'll have them inside of the document.
And Davin, I'll be shooting out an email probably next week with the recording.
Fantastic. Okay, cool. Well, I think that just about wraps it up then.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. And, yeah, you'll be able to have access to the video or also the slides. So I'll go ahead and stop recording and have a good day.